I'm going to be recording this session, and at the end of this afternoon session, we'll be emailing out to you a link to the recording as well as the PowerPoint. So if you have colleagues that aren't able to make it, you can certainly forward the link to the recording and the PowerPoint as well. So the goal of today's update session is really to present just a number of slides that will help to give you some updates related to special education, both instruction and procedural updates. But really the bulk of the time today is going to be dedicated to answering questions that you might have as we move forward and prepare for the return to school for students with disabilities. I wanted to start just by thanking each and every one of you for your leadership with your school teams. I know that it has been very challenging in some of the discussions you've had with your special education staff around how in the world they're going to get all of this work done. We knew that going into the return to school, we didn't get a lot of relief from the federal government or from the state of Virginia around all of the things that need to be done in preparation for kids coming back virtually, and as we think about a phase-in plan, all the work that needs to be done around that as well. So I know that it is countless hours for both you and your staff in trying to get planning done and get things in place and together for our families and for our kids. So I just appreciate, again, all of the hard work and all of your efforts. And we will hopefully be able to answer some questions today. And then, again, we're committed to being able to connect back with you after this meeting as needed in order to help clarify or answer questions or get any of our staff involved in some of the situations that you might find yourself in. So we'll go ahead and get started on the slides, and then afterward we will update, or we will have a chance to have you ask questions using the raise your hand feature. We'll be monitoring and asking people to ask their questions in the order in which we receive them. So we'll go ahead and start. And I'm going to introduce Ellie Stack, who is our coordinator of pre-K through 12 special education instruction. And she's going to talk to us a little bit first about the special education resource hub that we put together. Ellie?
Good afternoon, everyone. Thrilled to be here with you. The storm is right overhead here in Burke, so hopefully I'll stay connected. The one thing we wanted to start with is the Special Education Resource Hub. That came out in an infogram a few weeks ago, and we know that how much information comes to you in the infograms. But this is the site that we are using to make sure it has the most up-to-date information on it regarding supporting students with disabilities. As you all know, Instructional Services has a similar site, and Special Ed is on their site, and that has the essential standards and the curriculum for the start of the year. And then we've created this site so you and the staff that you are working with can find what they need to know when it comes to supporting students with disabilities. And as we're going out throughout today, you might hear us reference that this information is available on the Special Education Resource Hub. And so I'm going to turn it over to my colleague to talk about early childhood, and then I'll be back to talk about the adapted curriculum and the general curriculum.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Denise Forrest. I'm with Early Childhood Special Education. So I wanted to talk a little bit about laptop distribution. The laptop distribution for students who are in the class-based and PAC program will pick up laptops at the attending schools. And for everyone, we do have a subset of students named our resource students, where teachers that are centrally located go out and provide resources and specialized instruction to students in their child care settings or in their homes. In working with the coordinator of the T-Specs, I've provided a list by ID number and by base school, neighborhood school, of all of the resource students to the coordinator of the T-Specs. He in turn turned that list around to each of the T-Specs at each of the individual schools. So you may have students who are centrally assigned in SIS who may be coming to your school to pick up laptops. And those would be the resource students, and your T-Spec should verify their ID through the spreadsheet that was delivered to them by their supervisor. Thank you very much.
All right, and that brings us to our school-age students. We're going to start first with our students who are receiving Cat B services and or accessing the adapted curriculum. One of the things that you will find on the hub is an example of what a sample schedule might look like for students who are on an adapted curriculum. We would hope that for the majority of the students in your school, including those who are on an adapted curriculum, that they will be following the same schedule that the rest of your students are following. However, we know that there are some students who are, let's say they have a severe intellectual disability, or maybe some of our students in enhanced autism, where they are not able to attend to the full class session, whether it's the 45-minute class session or an hour-long class session. And so for those students who cannot attend to the computer and the lesson for that entire time, our sample schedule shows what the day might look like if you break it up into 30-minute sessions. And the 30-minute sessions in the sample schedule, we're breaking the class into 2 groups, and that allows for the much more individualized attention during 30 minutes rather than the larger group instruction for the whole hour. But I did want to just let you know those schedules are there, but also it's not a given that every student on an adapted curriculum is necessarily going to need a schedule that is modified from what the rest of your students are following. What's also listed in there are some general expectations that we have for our teachers who are working with students in the Cat B program. One of the expectations is that we are still including our students as much as we're able to. So that is still a part of what we would include in there, our expectations. Another one is that we do have added that our teachers are expected to connect with the parents of students twice a month or once every 2 weeks. If you all listened to the school board meeting, you might have heard that there was last week, there was a lot of questions or conversation around how often our teachers should be connecting with the parents. And so for the Cat B, the minimum expectation is that you're connecting with the parents twice a month, or that your teachers are, and then more if needed. And that's to help them as we know that especially for Cat B, the parents are and caregivers are such an important partner in the education that we're providing, and that's to allow us time to coach them and to really find out how things are going at home. And then just like with the general ed students, we do want to make sure our teachers are posting asynchronous activities, and guidance was shared with the principals last week on that. And so we've also want to make sure our teachers are posting asynchronous activities. Last week there was also an infogram, and it's available on the hub, about the research-based program use. And when we first closed down in March, we know that a lot of companies were restricting what we could use of their program during virtual learning. All of the companies have been shifting and really building resources, and we've been purchasing them as appropriate. And so the direction regarding the research-based programs and how they can be used during distance learning has been updated, and you can find that on the Special Ed Hub that we've linked to in the chat window. And then we also want to let you know for Cat B, we do have some licenses that we're making available. A lot of our students are using programs made by Attainment, and so we have purchased licenses so they can access those online. And then every Cat B teacher is also getting a subscription to News to You. That is it's a newsletter that comes out monthly, but it also, the website is chock full of resources that they can use during their instruction, and it is on current events. So what's nice is it allows the teachers to include those current events. When we switch to the general curriculum, or our students with Cat A services, the general expectations are that they are going to be sticking with core instruction as much as possible. This is the same guidance we would give during a typical school year. We don't want to necessarily be pulling them out of reading or math, so that they can get their specialized instruction programs. We want them to, as much as possible, be participating in the lessons that are being conducted by the teacher in whatever the setting. You know, it might be a self-contained setting, or it might be a general ed setting, might even be maybe in your advanced classes. But we don't want them pulled out as too much. We do think that for those students who do need the specialized instruction programs, that school teams hopefully will be able to make it so they can use that hour that's designated each day, Tuesday through Friday, to use those specialized instruction programs. Where there will have to be adjustments is if the program does take a little longer than the hour, or if the student's accessing two programs. Just like with the Cat B, though, we've updated the research-based program use guidance document. All of our programs are allowing us to use part of the program or all of the program for instruction this year. There are some programs that the student has to have the physical material in front of them. So example, McGraw-Hill programs, the corrective reading, connecting math concepts, reading mastery. The students would need their workbooks. The ones that they were using in school last year would have to go home with the students so they could use the workbooks, but everything else is available online. And with all populations, we are back to, as much as possible, doing that instructional matching. We know that at the end of last year, one example is many of our students switched over to using Lexia. Well, now that we're able to provide the instruction with direct instruction with students, our teams will be working with your teams to have those conversations regarding the most appropriate program. So I do see in the chat window there are concerns about getting into the special ed hub, and then so yes, real quick, you do need to. It's best to be in Chrome, and it is a Google account, so you will need to be logged into Google. But if you can't get in, let me know and I'll switch it around. All right, related services.
Thank you, Ellie. So I'm going to quickly go through this slide on related services. And again, we do have staff here available for any follow-up questions once we get to the Q&A session. So just want to stress that there needs to be flexibility in service delivery during both synchronous and asynchronous blocks, Tuesday through Friday, in order to deliver related services. And again, we trust that case managers are looking very closely at their students' schedules just to make sure that however adjustments or whatever adjustments they're making to student schedules allows for some flexibility so they're not missing pieces of instruction that's needed during the course of their day. But we do want to make sure that you know that we're trying as much as we can to give your special ed teachers and our related service providers the flexibility that they need to be able to deliver IEP services. That includes that Monday block. We had stated earlier last week that that Monday time could also be used and coordinated for related service delivery as well. And we also wanted to let you know that parent consent is only required now for participation in meetings only when the student on a teacher's caseload is in attendance at the meeting. So this is true for OT, PT, and speech and language. So in the spring, we were requiring that an informed consent or parent consent form was required for any virtual meeting, but now saying only when the student on a caseload in his attendance at that meeting. Other reminders, PPE for special education testing should be available, and I know there are, since the PPE has been delivered, there are differences school to school what PPE has been received at this point, but we're going to be working closely with you to make sure that we're getting you the proper PPE that your teachers are going to need. And then I put a link there to the infogram that was sent a couple of weeks ago that outlines the proper safety protocols observed when conducting in-person evaluation. And then lastly, related service providers should be included in all IEP addendums so that they have an opportunity to addend any related service goals and or service hours. So we just wanted to remind you about that. Okay, I'm going to have Tina Wilkerson talk to us a little bit about an exciting training that's happening this week.
So we are encouraging that our Cat B preschool, enhanced autism, and secondary students begin to teach their staff begin to teach their students how to wear masks. This is an important skill for all students to keep them safe in the community, in the school setting, and on the bus. We believe most students can learn to wear a mask using ABA principles of reinforcement, pairing, and shaping. If teachers begin to instruct on this now, we will be farther along in the process when we need to pivot and the students return for face-to-face instruction. We are having recommended training on Wednesday, August 26th, to support staff in teaching students how to wear masks and to assist their parents in this very important instruction. All trainings will be recorded so that staff will also have access to asynchronous trainings on this.
Okay, I'm going to go ahead and turn things over to Jane Strong, who's going to go through some of the procedural support updates.
Good afternoon, everybody. I wanted to share with you all that just as we created leveled guidance documents for staff for the return to school and especially around IEPs, we were asked and did develop a version that is appropriate for parents. And we wanted to let you all know that that is posted. It's been shared on the public web and with the leadership of our advisory committee and our special ed PTA. So if you have parents who ask teachers, you'll now know that they're not referring to, they shouldn't be referring to the guidance document that was for staff. They're likely referring to the one that they can find online for parents. IEP addendums are happening. We are tracking with a report in CSTARS to see how things are going. We know that for some schools, they're going like gangbusters, and other schools, it's a little slower. Please make sure that you are assigning case management. If you feel that there's a delay in getting case management assigned, I would highly encourage you, if it's possible, to use last year's case manager for the amendment or IEP review process as things get going right now in August. That's more of a secondary thing really than an elementary thing usually, but I wanted to point that out for you all. The evaluations, just some reminders. We get a lot of questions still with our PSLs and with our due process office about the evaluation timelines. As you guys know, in the spring, we were able to seek and get parents to agree to a 45-day extension of timelines for evaluations. We're no longer using that process because, you know, we're in the phased return to school. So we're not extending timelines. For anybody that did have a signed extension letter from spring, however, we're asking that those evaluations start and roughly have until about December 7th to get them done. That is a soft target because of the way the letter is worded and just in getting things going for evaluations at your school. But the bottom line is to work through your evaluation list in chronological order as fast as you can, you know, with using good quality. So that's that other bullet there is clear out your backlog of open initial evaluations as best you can. We've been getting lots of questions about the hearing screenings and vision screenings, but hearing screenings are required for any initial evaluation. They're not required for triennial or reevals. I know we frequently ask for a hearing screen anyway, just to be on the safe side. I believe schools tend to do that. However, we are not doing, you know, you don't have to do a rush job on a vision screening right now. The ones that you ought to be worrying about the most are any of your initial evaluations that you want to go to eligibility for. If testing is getting finished and you're looking to have a hearing screening done. We are asking for help from our Fairfax County Health Department, so hopefully very soon we'll have more information out there for you. We have heard that in some schools, the PHNs last year had help with trained front staff. And if that's your situation and you feel comfortable going forward with the screenings, you can do that. And then, Mike, let me just see. So this is you, but I wanted to make sure that I heard everything that were the high-flying special ed procedural questions, and I think that's it. Thanks.
Great, thank you, Jane. So this last slide just focuses your attention on our updated public web page for our parent community. So we included the link and also just a number of different quick reference tabs or navigation tabs that are included at the top of the web page so that parents can look to a topic and navigate directly to that section of the web page. We've also included some sample schedules for our parents on this web page. We've included links to our frequently asked questions, and also there's a web page dedicated to some of the roles and responsibilities of our related service providers, additional central office staff like ATS resource teachers, ABA coaches, behavior intervention teachers, adapted PE, etc. So we want to make sure that you were aware that this web page was updated last Friday and that we've indicated and sent out notification to SEPTA, ACSD, and Northern Virginia POAC. And then we'll also be including this information in our special education newsletter that goes out to all of our families this week. Just in case you get questions, you'll know that this information has been updated and it's out there for the community. Okay, so that is the end of our slide deck for today. And I see that we do have quite a bit of time left. We have about 35 minutes left for general questions, again, related to anything that you've heard today or other questions that you might have. So we're going to go through and we'll just open it up to questions that you might have. Go ahead, Angela.
Hi, Mike. My question is in relation to the substitute plan that was shared last week, that if teachers, I'm assuming general ed teachers, are absent from school up to 3 days, we're not getting a sub, and that means that kids are doing work asynchronously. What does that mean in terms of special ed hours for our students that have special ed services in general ed setting when there's general ed setting being provided?
Thanks, Angela, for your question. I don't know that I've had a chance to talk with Jane about that particular scenario, but Jane, maybe you could just speak in general about the delivery of special ed services when we do have substitutes that are in schools working with kids.
Sure, Mike. So, in a typical, set of circumstances, which is so long ago, I stumbled over saying that. So you all have other school staff who would then carry out specialized instruction according to the IEP. It would be the sub or any support staff that you have. And I've heard about HR and the 3 days and whether or not you're getting subs. There's been no discussion with me about how we're going to ensure that the IEP is implemented. It was my assumption, I'll verify this, but it was my assumption that be using the support staff that you have. But we can circle back around and get some better clarity around that topic.
Eric, you're up.
Yes, good evening, good afternoon. Can you just speak a little bit about what communication is going to look like for special education leads?
Hi, Eric. This is Jane. So, you know, every year we do 3 to 4 meetings with our elementary special education lead teachers, and our plan is so far to do that virtually. And then, of course, communication usually gets pushed down through PSLs if it can't wait until a scheduled lead teacher meeting.
Okay. All right. Thank you for that.
Sure.
Okay, Rebecca, you're up next.
Hi. So, and I'm not sure what information you might have on this, but with all the talk about the return of cohorts and knowing that our youngest students are preschoolers and our most impacted students would be the first to return, I have some staff, including instructional assistants, who are parents, and they weren't as worried when we were all virtual, but now all of the talk about coming back sooner, they're concerned about what will happen with them if they cannot return to the building because they've got children home. And I'm not sure if we know anything yet when these cohorts go to return, if there are families that say, you know what, I'm not comfortable coming back in person. I still want to stay virtual. Are we honoring that? Do we know anything about that, as my staff is starting to worry a little bit?
Yes, thank you for that question. So that's a very timely question. We are this week going to be having some meetings to address the phase plan. So I know that there were some initial conversations at the school board work session last week that gave some information around the different groups that would be phased in. So this week our planning is going to sort of extend a little bit as we look at the timing and setting up some timelines for the phase-in plans. And I think it'll probably include some of the information and the questions that you're asking here today. We do know that families were able, through their survey, to make a determination around either virtual or in-person. And so there probably will be some level of discussion around whether or not families have an opportunity to change that designation, and certainly that'll be part of the conversation. But we don't have any definitive information right now, but just know that those conversations are happening this week, and that we'll be sharing some of that information out as we're meeting and as it becomes available.
Thank you, and hopefully they'll include instructional assistants as part of that planning as well, because they're definitely part of the staff that's concerned. Thank you.
Megan, you're up next.
Hi, my question pertains specifically to the enhanced autism classroom, and in talking with teachers as they're planning for addendums that are happening, they are feeling a little overwhelmed by the sheer volume of goals that students on those caselets typically have. And I was just wondering if you had any guidance to offer, or if there was going to be anything further for them to figure out what is a reasonable amount of goals, or how to write the goals specific to that particular group of students.
So maybe we'll have Jane Strong start and just answer generally about determining goals through the IEP addendum process. And then maybe if Tina Wilkerson from our ABA program has anything to add, she can follow up on that.
Hi. So from a procedural compliance angle, while I understand the concern about the number of goals, I think the ideal would be to try to figure out a way to implement the goals that were in the IEP before, with whatever adjustment is needed if the circumstance is different, that you can't implement that goal as it was written. So I know our guidance document addressed some of that, and Tina and others on our team really worked hard on how that appears in the guidance document, but just, because Mike wanted me to start from sort of the procedural angle, we're not saying go in and slash all your goals and change them all and reduce them because it's reduced service. But you do have the ability as a team to talk about what is reasonable and what is doable within the virtual format. But we are expected to provide a free, appropriate public education. So if you go in and you start slashing tons of goals, then that gives rise for a parent concern that is legitimate. So you may not have wanted to hear that, but you're going to need to try to be very careful and thoughtful in working with the family on what are the reasonable goals. And then I'll kick it over to Tina for the specifics.
Yeah. So I think too, a piece of it for the teachers is the criteria that they are worrying about. And there's really some great ways to look at criteria that can help them still make it measurable, but may not be as tight as it has been when we've been in school. They can reach out to their ABA coaches. They are more than happy to help them with this. We train them in it. They can reach out to Kelly Galbraith, Kelly Lobo, Shauna Gardzell as the specialist, and they can reach out to myself, and we can help them look at those goals and really fine-tune them so that they're going to work in the virtual environment and then also if pivoting to face-to-face occurs.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Tina and Jane. James, you're up next.
Hey guys, thanks for taking time to answer some questions here. I have a couple if it's okay. First is as far as service hours go, I just want to confirm because our teachers have questions obviously, and I think it kind of depends on where they've been looking for an answer. Is it safe to say that across the board it should be an hour in the gen ed setting and then up to an hour outside the gen ed setting?
So I'm going to answer your question by asking you a question back, unfortunately, just because I'm trying to, process and get a grasp of where that question might be coming from. The bottom line is, the IEP team needs to list the amount of services for the student that the student needs in order to implement the IEP. And so that hour a day was a guideline. And remember on the guidelines from ISD and from our department, it says it's going to be an IEP team decision. IEP services can happen, whenever during the week that it is needed. So when you're asking, is it an hour here and an hour there, it really depends on the type of disability and the type of program that student was in prior to the COVID shutdown. So for a student with a real mild disability, they might be joining their gen ed peers for most of the day, and an hour in a resource setting with a special educator for specialized instruction might be what they need. But there might be other students who need more than that. So rephrase or re-ask your question if I didn't get to what you were looking for.
No, I think that makes sense. I believe where their question was coming from was the PDF that came out. I'm trying to think when it came out, but it's the the elementary return to school guidance document. There's a chart down there, and it says examples of possible IEP service time. And I'm just trying to find it real quick. For elementary general curriculum services page example, 2 hours a week of specialized instruction with 1 hour a week in the general education setting and 1 hour a week in the special education setting. And I think the teachers are kind of running with that a little bit and thinking that that is the expectation.
If they could remember to individualize, and I don't know if, Ellie, if you want to add anything, because I know you were a little bit more hands-on than I was into that section of guidance. feel free to add anything that would help.
Definitely. No, I appreciate the question, and it also helps to hear that feedback that that some teachers, and we thought this might happen, that some teachers are taking that sort of as sort of the rule to go by. Really, like Jane mentioned, it should be totally individualized. So I've pulled up on the screen, this is the sample education schedule or elementary schedule that was posted on the Fairfax County website. And so for our students who are accessing the general curriculum, who, let's say, once again, that student with a very mild disability, they may not need support throughout the entire day in the gen ed setting. And that's, for many of our students, going to be the morning meeting math, science, language arts specials. And so for the student that was thought about in that example that you shared, James, that student maybe only needed help, let's say, in language arts a couple times a week for a few minutes. And then they were getting some specialized instruction time from that 150 to 250 time period. We're going to have other students who maybe have been in team talk settings and they need that specialized support in every setting. Well, then their hours are going to look different, where they're going to have the support in the different classes where they actually need them. So it's really looking at the class, looking at the student, looking at their goals, and then seeing where they need the support. And for some students, it may not be in any of the general education classes. It may just be during that specialized instruction time. And then for other students, it may be supporting them, depending on where their disability is, in the specific classes.
Okay, that makes sense. Thank you. And then my second question is about BIPs. Has there been guidance as to how we should be moving forward with BIPs already in place, as well as, new ones moving forward?
That is, I'll take that one, and Mike or Jane can add on to that. That is one that they're finalizing the guidance that's available on that, provided on that, and that will be coming out shortly. But that's something that we're looking at, knowing that with the FBA and BIPs, the behaviors and how they present at home rather than in the classroom are different. And I don't know if Tina, if you have more to add to that as well.
No, I think that's the piece. It's different depending whether they're home or at school. I do know that for the ABA coaches, they are helping to support the teachers and coaching parents on some of the behavioral aspects that they're dealing with in the home. So we're here to support however we can support.
Yeah, the one thing I would add, you guys, is that, in general, we're not going to be writing new FBAs and BIPs. We're going to address problem solving with parents through goals and communication, but it's not necessarily the way a BIP would have been done in the classroom setting virtually. So just keep that in mind. And then, for teachers who have particular, thoughts, concerns about that area, they can either, of course, ask their PSL for some assistance or their special ed instruction specialist or curriculum resource teacher for more hands-on, really, problem solving the particular case that you have.
Okay,
thank you.
Angela, you're up next.
Hi, I had a question about the proposed phase-in plan. If we were to do that starting end of September, beginning of October, would special ed teachers be expected to amend the IEPs again?
Angela, we were hoping no, but it will depend. It will depend on what is the plan once it's developed for a number of days coming back in. And so, I know none of us likes that answer, but we're going to try our very best to not have to have amendments, but it is likely that there may need to be some adjustments.
Okay, it looks like Kelly is next.
Hey Mike, thanks for doing this. I have a question about the level 2 in-person instruction phase-in plan. It is super clear in group 2 that my comprehensive service site students are coming back. The question I have is, do all students in my enhanced autism program, are they all considered students that access the adapted curriculum? Well, some of them are taking the SOLs, and so how would we part and parcel which students in enhanced autism come back into the building when I would say they all require an intensive level of support?
Yeah, so that's a good question, Kelly. I don't know that we'll have time to sort of go through all of those considerations today, but you're absolutely right. We do have some students in our enhanced autism classroom that are on the adapted curriculum, and so those students are easily cohorted as we look at a phase-in plan, but we do have another group of students who do split their time between the general education setting as well as that self-contained setting. So I think once we move forward with the phase-in plan and set some timelines, we'll have to have further discussion because it may look different for different groups of students within the enhanced autism program. So while I don't have all the answers now, just know that we'll partner together to figure out how that's going to work and what that'll look like. The initial thinking around the phase-in was that we could provide a phase-in plan for groups that we could easily cohort, which means we didn't have to have a lot of mixing within the school building once students arrived and were in class. So there is a possibility that some models would bring students into the school building, but there could be potential for those students to potentially join some general ed classes virtually from within the school building. But again, we'll have to talk through some of those scenarios, but that's a good question. Thanks, Kelly.
Mike, just a quick follow-up then. Do you have any idea when that guidance might come out? Simply because we're looking at good instructional pairing with our staff and our students, and we know that our students in enhanced autism sometimes demonstrate rigidity, and we want to make sure that we establish rapport and reinforce those relationships. So any idea on the timeline?
Well, I mentioned earlier that this week we are having meetings with leadership team to set some timelines in place. So we don't have the exact timelines now, but we do realize that schools, for a number of reasons, not only training, but also getting classrooms set up and working through some of the staffing things, we do need to get that information out fairly quickly. So we anticipate that very soon we'll have that timeline in place. I see that Judy Dupree has her hand up. So Judy, do you want to add something to the conversation?
Yeah, hi, Judy Dupree, Coordinator for Related Services. I just wanted to follow up on some of the chatter on the PPE as far as PPE being provided to all school-based evaluators. While they weren't explicitly mentioned in the infogram, that would include your adapted PE teacher, itinerants coming in to do evaluation, your PTs and your OTs. So any itinerant staff that would be part of in-person evaluations in your buildings, they would be part of that PPE allotment as well.
Thanks, Judy. And we do realize that there are some schools that are obviously larger than others and have students with greater needs that might require additional PPE beyond what that initial distribution provided to you. So we're going to be meeting with our Office of Procurement Services who are ordering the PPE materials this week. And so we want to be able to provide the PPE that's needed for your evaluators if you don't have enough in that school building. So I anticipate we might put another infogram out or somehow get information out to all of you once we meet this week with that group and figure out a way to get information from you for the additional need of PPE. I know the initial allotments are going out, but of course that doesn't provide any allotments for special ed teachers that might be part of this phase-in plan, or again, for schools that might need additional PPE. So we'll be working on that this week. Okay, I'm just looking in the participant list for any additional questions. I don't see any hands up at this point. but we'll give it some time. We do have about 12 or 13 minutes left if anyone does have a follow-up question. Well, I know that there is always a need to have your questions answered, and I know that our staff is ready to answer questions individually and to partner with you. I know that you also have your central office support staff for both Category A and Category B students, so please feel free to reach out to them directly to have some questions answered. We'll go ahead and, if I don't see any last-minute questions, we'll go ahead and end our session for today. And as a follow-up email, again, I'll be sending out the link to the recording as well as the PowerPoint slide for today's meeting. And then as a reminder, we do have this same time slot scheduled for next Monday where we'll get together and give you some additional updates. I haven't scheduled out into September update meetings, but I will do that. I will schedule out Monday afternoons into September. Just as we start up school, we've got an opportunity to provide updates and answer questions that you might have. So I see we have Mike's hand up. So Mike, why don't we go to you and you can end it for today.
Good morning. I just wanted to verify that any synchronous time, including Mondays, would be used towards the special education students' hours.
You got it.
Okay, thank you. I just wanted to verify.
Yep.
Well, if I could, so for your scenario, the answer was yes. There are students with disabilities where the intervention time on Monday and throughout the week might not necessarily be special ed hours. So for a student who requires all that time, then yes, they can use it for the special ed hours. But for a student who maybe only needs a couple touch bases a week, they may not be using that intervention time specifically for special ed services. Instead, they might be using it for the other intervention, just like your general ed students. So just wanted to clarify that not all students need to have all of that time listed as special ed services. I don't know if I just confused it or not.
All right. Well, since I don't see any more hands up at this point, we're going to go ahead and end the session, and we'll send out that email with the link in the PowerPoint later this afternoon. So thank you, everyone, and have a great afternoon.